A few people have been asking me recently, how come you haven't done a video on the potential second round prospects that the Bulls could potentially pick in the draft that's happening this week? And there are a few reasons for that. One, second round picks are really so few and far between that it's really impossible to assess or predict who is going to be available and on the board by the 38th pick, which is where the Bulls will be drafting. The other is I really don't follow college basketball all that much, and the players that I do follow are generally the top prospects, so I don't really have a ton of knowledge on the players who are projected to go into the second round. And then finally, yes, it's great to speculate who might be the second round pick and hope that we somehow get a steal of a player in the second round. The fact of the matter is that most second round picks end up not really amounting to much in the NBA, more than just being role players. Some even end up barely playing in the league for their career, and a lot of second round picks end up not even playing a single game in the league because they never made it past training camp. Well, in today's video, I'll finally be discussing some potential prospects that are expected to be available around the time that the Bulls pick, which of course could change in just a matter of days, but we'll take a few of these guys and what they can bring to the Bulls, and soon enough, by the end of the week, we'll know who the Bulls will have selected. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Real quick, if you missed my last video, I did a one-on-one interview with NBC Sports Chicago's very own Rob Schaefer, which was really a pleasure to be able to chat with Rob, as the guy knows the game so well and all the ins and outs of the business side of the game. Feel free to check it out in case you missed it. I'll leave a link to it in the description as well as on the end screen of this one. And let me know if you guys want and are continuing to enjoy these interview videos, as I'm trying to keep the content engaging during the offseason by switching it up a bit and having interviews with Bulls insiders. I'm not sure how many more of these guys will actually agree to be able to participate in these type of interviews, but really I've just been getting lucky at this point, reaching out to them via email, and they've actually replied to me and agreed to do it. Some of course haven't, which is fine, but I'll continue these interviews if you guys want them. I've also created a separate playlist for all of the interviews so they are easy to access for you. But anyway, let's dive into today's content. So for some history and context, as I'm sure some of you are probably wondering why I am not so excited about the prospect of drafting a player in the second round. And that's because, as I mentioned, more often than not, second round picks don't really end up being impactful players. Yes, there are of course steals in the second round that happen every so often. You got guys like Draymond Green, Malcolm Brogdon, Jalen Brunson, Devontae Graham, Montrezl Harrell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jeremy Grant, and yes, even this year's MVP Nikola Jokic, just to name a few players who are currently in the league that were drafted in the second round. And for a bit of history, the players that the Bulls have drafted with their last 10 second round picks have been Marko Simonovic, of course, Daniel Gafford, one second round pick that I actually really liked and thought was an underrated selection, but of course we traded him. Jordan Bell, traded for cash considerations, Paul Zipser, Cameron Bairstow, Eric Murphy, Malcolm Lee, Sonny Weems, Aaron Gray, and Jameson Curry. Yeah, I'm sure even for most diehard Bulls fans, some of you guys aren't even familiar with them or at least remember them, and that's because most of them didn't play in the league for that long. But all of that being said, we do know that Arturas Karnisovas is pretty well known for scouting talent and picking up players late in the draft that are often overlooked, which obviously we hope ends up being the case with Marko Simonovic. Now, Rob Schaefer of NBC Sports Chicago came out with an article just a few days ago in which he discussed some potential options of players who are slated to land around where the Bulls are going to be picking. And so I looked at these guys and did a little bit of research into them a bit further and watched some of their highlight videos where I could find them anyway. And unfortunately, most of their highlight footage is copyright protected, so you'll have to stare at their picture for a little bit. But the first guy that was mentioned was Johann Bagharan, or I guess it might be pronounced Bagharan since he is French, currently playing in a professional league in Paris. Now, Johann is a wing that would likely fit best at the 3 spot. He's a 6'5" guy with incredibly long arms, and based on his highlights, he appears to be a great slasher to the hoop when needed and actually a decent defender. Well, I also like about this guy is that, I feel with second round picks, guys playing overseas anyway, they're generally more often a bit more NBA ready than college players are who are projecting to go in the second round. That's because they've already played against grown professional athletes overseas rather than playing in the NCAA. That being said though, Bagharan is still very young, only 18 years old. he would actually be the youngest player in the draft class if he is in fact drafted, which can be seen as a good thing, the fact that he's already that good at age 18 with still room to grow and get better, or it could also be seen as a downside in the sense that he will most certainly be a project and take a considerable amount of time before he turns into anything. And I think at his age, if he is in fact drafted, he'll likely be a draft and stash player for a couple of years. The next player who was mentioned was AJ Lawson, who is a shooting guard out of South Carolina. Now Lawson is a bit older at 21, but he was also a very productive player in the NCAA, scoring 16.6 points per game in his junior season, which for college, where the games are pretty low scoring in general, is very impressive. He is still an off-the-ball shooter, which makes you question his fit on the team, since we already have an off-the-ball shooter in Coby White, and of course a shooting guard already in Lavine, who is going to be averaging at least 35 minutes a game. But, you know, an older player who might be a little more NBA ready would likely fit and make more sense for the Bulls given their overall timeline right now. Another guy that was mentioned was Charles Basie, who is actually a center out of Kentucky. Now, this guy has a massive 7'3" wingspan with a height of 6'10". I mean, anytime you're playing for Kentucky, you're doing something right at that level to get recruited by one of the best college schools in history. Now, the other impressive thing about Basie is that he was actually the Conference USA Player of the Year, averaging 17.6 points per game, 11.6 rebounds, and 3.1 blocks, which was one of the highest in the nation. Now, the reason I like this is because if the Bulls aren't able to in fact re-sign Tice, they're going to need a backup big man who can provide us some rim protection, who will go out, crash the boards, and block shots. This one is an interesting prospect because he could turn out to be a great player in the league and really just isn't being looked at as a high prospect because he's not the most athletic, he's not that quick, and you would think that centers in the league, you would need that in the NBA, but it's possible he could still develop into that player. Another name also being floated around, and this is another center, and that would be Deyron Sharp out of North Carolina. Sharp is a bit younger, as he'll be a one-and-done player, hasn't really perfected his craft when it comes to finishing at the rim, but is a solid rebounder, and unlike Basie, is very quick and agile and could be another option as a backup center behind Vucevic. The one area that is concerning about Sharp is that he is not at all a three-point shooter. He only attempted 2 3-pointers in his entire college career and shot a cringeworthy 50.5% from the free throw line. That's worse than Ben Simmons, so not something you want to see in today's NBA. And then finally, the last name that was mentioned in this article was Josh Christopher, a guard out of ASU. Now, most mock drafts do expect Christopher to actually go in the late first round rather than the early second, but still a potential option and someone the Bulls should pick up if he's still available at 38. He's not the most efficient scorer, but he does have a lot of confidence in his play. He's a great shot creator and is a decent two-way player in the fact that he is a solid perimeter defender, which we know the Bulls could use. Anyway, I know there are a lot of guys that have been mentioned in other mock drafts that I haven't covered, and that's what makes predicting who will be going in this range in the second round so difficult, because even some guys who were initially expected to go in the early second round have seen their draft stock rise all the way to being a mid-first rounder to even a lottery pick, so you just never know what might happen this late in the draft. I know there was a lot of speculation that the front office will look to trade up in the draft to get a first-round pick, but I really don't see that happening, as the Bulls, if they're looking to make any trades, they're going to be focused more on established players who fit their timeline, not guys who are going to be projects that are going to take a few years to develop. Let me know if there are other guys, though, in the early second round range that you've been hearing about as potential options for the Bulls and why you think they would be a good fit for this Bulls lineup. Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.